put a spell on you. Because you're mine. Ooh. You know I can't stand the things you do to me. You know I'm not lying. And I can't take all your running around. Ooh, and the way you put me down, I can't take no more. You know I put a spell on you. You, oh, 'cause you're mine.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gary from learntoplaymusic.com, and welcome to the Music Space. Don't forget your Q&A apps, your headphones. We're here to inspire, interact, and all that stuff. Today I have my special friend and my special guest, Andy Seymour.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Great to have you on, mate. Andy is a vocalist, a singer, songwriter. He's a
river dancer,
river
ballerina,
wrestler, and he does loads of voiceovers, and you've probably heard him on the radio, on the television, everywhere. He's also an entertainer extraordinaire. And you started very young. Andy, tell us what got you inspired in the first place.
Well, I was brought up in a very fiery and energetic gospel music environment. My dad was an itinerant preacher, and I spent probably the first 10 to 12 years of my life on the road, traveling with my mum and dad, my folks, all around country, Australia, as they would, go from town to town, and they would help set up these massive, great big tents, almost like a circus tent. I recall them being as big as a circus tent, but they weren't. They were probably a lot smaller than that. But they'd have these fire and brimstone gospel, Sunday services and Saturday night services in paddocks all around farming communities. And there was always, local musicians and people from various churches around the community were invited to come along. And so there'd be this crazy hodgepodge band, and it could be people with piano accordions and banjos, and one guy will show up with a trombone and lots of guitars. And I was brought up around this music environment, and I started playing drums when I was about 6, and by the time I was 12, I started playing making a living. I was getting paid doing gigs.
Can you remember your first gig?
I can. It was a big country dance, a big sort of bush barn dance. I can't tell you where it was. It was in South Australia somewhere, and I was with this bunch of musicians that were considerably older than me. When you're 12, everybody's old. So I just remember all these like old guys, and I was drumming, and they would turn around and give me the thumbs up, and I earned $100 for myself back in 1976 or something.
$100?
I reckon I was earning more than my dad was back in the 70s. It's pretty funny.
$100. There you go. And you started singing, or your first gig, about 18 years old?
Well, look, brought up again with this gospel music and singing all the time in churches and choirs and all this sort of thing. Used to do a lot of backing vocals as a drummer, as a young, through my teens. But at about 18, I decided I used to get perpetually frustrated with the singer who was up front. I'm sitting back there playing drums, and I used to think,
I can do that.
I reckon I could do a better job than this guy or girl. So at about 18, I hung up the sticks for a little while and stepped around out the front. It was terrifying. Yeah. Suddenly I couldn't hide behind anything. And apparently, there's more to singing than just standing there with your arms by your sides looking like you're Bambi in the headlights. So I learnt how to be an entertainer. But yeah, I started singing out the front from about 18.
So apart from the gospel influence, what are some of your other major influences?
Well, when we weren't travelling around, I grew up in a fairly, well, I won't call it a pokey little country town, but I grew up in a country centre. They had one radio station, and I listened to that. I had this radio glued to my ear the whole time, and every time a birthday came around, I would ask for a new radio, a new little transistor radio with earphones or whatever. I had one radio station, and so I had this, you know, genre of music from here to here. I had everything on there. They'd play Frank Sinatra, they'd play Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, Elvis, Tony Joe White, Dean Martin. So I developed a passion pretty much for all music. I love it all. But the guys that made a big influence on me, even as a little boy, I identified with guys that sang about their broken heart or their lost love. And I liked the way they used to bare their soul. And so you've got guys like Johnny Cash. I could hear the cry in his voice. I loved the jazz ballads where you'd hear Sinatra or Dean Martin singing about lost love and their broken heart. And I identified with these guys. And so I love, essentially what my passion is nowadays is roots music, blues and soul and gospel and rockabilly, anything that's started out as the roots. I love it.
Something that reflects life.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to a la-di-da.
Yeah.
Sort of
honest
tune.
lyrics.
Yeah.
Honest. What I love about country music is the lyrics. Men aren't afraid to cry in songs. They're not afraid to talk about how devastated they are. In even modern country music right now, that the songs are still written by people that mean what they're writing, and I love it.
So one of the songs that you chose was the old Wooden Cross.
Yes, the old Rugged Cross. It's a beautiful,
Rugged Cross.
yeah, it's a beautiful. Look, this song almost was imprinted on me. I was a very young boy. I must have been 6. We had this big canvas tent set up somewhere in way backwoods of somewhere, and people came from far and wide. There were trucks and tractors and you know, tray top trucks and all sorts of stuff showing up for this big Saturday night gospel service. And this farmer, who looked like he'd come straight from the milking shed, steps up in front of everybody. He's still got his funny old hat on, and he sang the old Rugged Cross with a guitar. While he was singing it, he started to cry, and I remember looking up at him in this dim. It was all the tent was lit with kerosene lanterns and things, just because of the remoteness, not because electricity wasn't invented. and he's singing, and he's got tears streaming down his cheeks. That's how much this song meant to him. And I remember at 6 years old going like, wow, I like that song. And so I'd love to do this song because it's a fantastic old school gospel song.
Okay, well, let's do
All right.
a verse and a chorus maybe.
A little one, just a short version, sure. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. I figured that was short enough.
That's lovely, lovely. And yeah, and that is a really heartfelt tune, beautiful tune.
It's beautiful.
One. So apart from gospel, you eventually got into rock and roll, obviously, and rockabilly, and
I did.
Lots of other styles. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, you know, it's funny. Look, I make a living out of music. It's what I do as my absolute income, and because of that, I need to be very diverse. One of the products I do is I do an Elvis show. I love Elvis. I love him. I love singing his music. And, you know, let's face it, Elvis really was the guy that started rockabilly. He blended gospel and blues and country together and made this very rhythmic sort of approach. And he was absolutely unique. But it wasn't Elvis that got me into rockabilly. I only knew Elvis as a gospel singer. As a little boy, I one time heard one of Elvis's gospel songs on a country radio station as we were driving along. And I said, hey, I recognize that song. I sing that in Sunday school. That was how I discovered Elvis. What got me onto rockabilly was actually Johnny Cash, listening to some Johnny stuff. And now I absolutely adore Johnny. And so the rockabilly thing hit me like a freight train when I was a kid, driving along, listening to this crackly little AM radio in the car, Dad's trusty old station wagon. And I heard this Johnny Cash song. And as I recall, I think it was Folsom Prison, which is, you know, I mean, I love the song, but yeah, Johnny is what got me hooked on this rhythmic, sort of skiffily, you know, Johnny didn't even have a drummer, as neither did Elvis. When they first started out, they just traveled with slap bass, acoustic guitar. There was no drums, but yet they had this driving rhythm. And you know, as a kid that was into drums, that's what got me, was this rhythmic singing and this rhythmic playing. And I love it.
It's amazing how Johnny sort of cuts over and through most musical genres. All musos from jazz love him.
Totally.
You know, rock and rollers love him. Country people love him. Just, yeah, he seems to be universal in many ways. So obviously you sing for a living. What do you do to practice your art? I mean, do you sit at home and practice scales? Or do you just sing? What sort of things do you do to challenge yourself?
Look, the scale thing, there's lots of value in that, because that's why it was designed to be that way. But for me, what I like to do is find a song that is very difficult to sing and try and emulate that, because in doing so, you teach yourself, you know, I think I listened, like Sam Cooke, an absolutely astonishing singer, and listen to him in his very early gospel stuff with Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers. He sings some absolutely astonishing vocal licks, and his voice control is absolutely amazing. And so I'll listen to one of his songs and I go, how's he doing that? And that becomes my practice, listening to it, emulating what he's doing, trying to find voice control and what he's doing. And to me, there's nothing worse than forcing yourself to practice if you're not interested in it. You know, there's a kid that lives next door to me and he practices drums every day. And I hear him start out doing all these basic rudiments, and within 5 minutes, he's going berserk, and there's absolutely no format to what he's doing, because he clearly hates practicing.
He just wants to play.
So he just wants to play. And I think if you're going to practice, or you're going to go to a rehearsal, you've got to enjoy it. It's got to be what you're into and your passion. Otherwise, you're going through the motions and you're going to hate it. So the way I practice is I'll sing songs that I am dying to learn, to get to the bottom of how they're doing that. Or I'll look at a completely different genre. I'll be honest with you, just of late, I've actually been listening to Ness and Dorma, and I'm singing along with it, going, I want to do what they're doing. And it's wow.
So there's a group called Ness and Dorma, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, the tune.
The tune of the song, Ness and Dorma.
Any particular is it Pavarotti or something like
no, that? Oh my Lord, I've just had the blind guy.
Oh, okay, the television fella.
Beard, blind. I've had a complete mental block. His voice is just ringing.
I think most people know who we're talking about, but nobody in the studio.
I've had a mental block on him. But
could be a question time thing.
Interestingly, I'm not a tenor, so you know it's a little bit silly for me to be trying to hit those crazy notes as a tenor when I'm not a tenor. But at the same time, I've been studying with a very, very prominent vocal teacher, Naomi Ayres, who teaches the Still method, and she's been teaching me how to project and how to belt without doing damage. And what I've learned just from the brief training I've had with her is astonishing. And suddenly I'm hitting these notes, and I'm going like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." So that's how I practice.
Just diverse as possible, not sort of settling on one area of singing, but acknowledging.
Because I'm just my passion for music is here to here. I love everything. I've got a big band that does swing, and I've got a little jazz thing. I've got a blues thing. I've got a rockabilly thing. I sing an Elvis gospel show. I love it all.
Yeah, no, that's great. And apart from the ideas to practice and emulating different styles, is there anything you do to work on your time and your groove, that sort of thing, as in the more subtle nuances of singing rather than just singing the notes?
Totally. Rhythm is in me. A born drummer. You know, my mum and dad have got photographs of me dating back to the mid-60s when I was born, playing saucepans with wooden spoons. Like, clearly, I was born with rhythm. Rhythm plays a major role in you know, in my singing. And if you've got a good handle around a sense of rhythm, you can then play with it.
Yeah. And
you can push and pull time. And if I have to explain pushing and pulling time, then clearly, you know, if you need that explained to you, you're not there with it, so I won't try and explain it. But time and good rhythm is very, very important to me. Quite often, well, you and I have actually done some work together, and we just simply use your guitar only. And so I match your playing with some rhythmic singing, and it takes about a minute for you to customize to hearing such a simple arrangement. But before long, we've had people up dancing and all sorts of things. Rhythm is a big part of it for me.
Yeah. You talked about messing with the time too, you know, slowing down your phrase, perhaps pushing it in front of Frank Sinatra's perhaps a great example of that. If anybody wants to check that out, he was perhaps the master in some ways. And a lot of people always quote him as their major influence. Warming up before a gig, even before rehearsing, what sort of techniques do you go through?
I do a series of exercises which just gently ease your vocal folds into getting ready to sing, and it's crying, it's this expressing air sort of more out through your nose rather than your mouth. Very important to warm up. And again, thanks to Naomi Ayres, sounds like this is a running advert for her, doesn't it? She is absolutely astonishing.
Perhaps we should have her on the show to talk about some of these techniques.
Want to talk about vocalists, boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
It's also important to warm down after a gig. But I've been able to, in the past, before I learned how to belt properly, have been midway through a big performance. It might be a big music festival, and I've got a 10-piece band behind me, and we're laying it down with some big fat soul song. And I've run out of vocals because it could be an inept sound guy who doesn't understand more volume, please, the fold back, whatever. That's not a dig at sound guys, by the way. Although it sort of is. I've now learned how to, first of all, stop torturing my voice, but in the event that it does become, I've blown it out, I can save it. I can get it back within the case of a couple of minutes. It might mean calling a guitar solo and getting the guy on trombone to play something, and by doing a series of exercises, bang, I get my voice back. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But very important to warm up and warm down after a gig.
Should we do another little snippet of a song?
Yes.
Maybe?
What should we do?
Because this is what it's about, isn't it? It's actually singing. Dock of the Bay has always been one of your favourites.
Yes.
Otis Redding, is it?
Yes. Love soul. I know this probably sounds very unusual, doesn't it? A sweaty little fat chubby country boy growing up in the middle of Australia who's got this, passion for soul music and southern gospel. It is very irregular, but that's what struck a chord with me. Cool. And it doesn't get any better than Otis or Wilson Pickett for that matter. Love those guys. Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Looks like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what the 10 people tell me to do. So I guess I'll remain the same. I'm sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. 2,000 miles I roam just to make this place my home. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Nice playing.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I should come on the show.
Yeah, I'll interview you. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, it all happened when my father, he refused to take me to the circus.
Those clowns, I'll do that for you.
Yeah, that was great, mate.
Thank you.
Ben, question time. Do we have any?
Yeah, we've got a couple of emails that have come through. First one is a question from Sarah, who asks, what performance tips do you have for singers so that we don't look like a stunned Bambi on stage?
Okay, that's actually a very simple question to answer. There are many there's a difference between being a singer and being an entertainer. They're two very different things. If you are absolutely terrified of audiences, you know, you've been practicing and you've been rehearsing with bands and you're ready, but the thought of facing an audience is absolutely terrifying. Pick a spot at the back of the room, focus on it, and smile at it. Now, that doesn't mean just stay like this and smile while you're singing for the whole time. But the point I'm making is it could be multiple spots. There's also a way to basically, I don't know how else to put it, but make your eyes glaze over. So although you're looking at the audience, you're not actually looking at any specific person at all. And often people will go, I saw you looking at me. I wasn't looking. I'm sorry.
In that voice.
Yes, in that voice. It's about, you know, basically making the depth of your vision stop 3 meters out. And although it looks like and smile, point to somebody. It could wave, but focus on a point at the back or over there or over here without specifically looking at anybody. And and just do this. People love to see a singer or an entertainer who's smiling and totally enjoying themselves. And because if you're not, you look like you're either hating it or you're a bit pretentious and you're just all a little bit above it. So hope I answered that question.
Yeah, great.
We have a question from Sophia, who asks, what are some of the tips that you've learnt from Naomi to project and hit difficult notes?
Wow. Okay. Now, talking about this in a brief answer is borderline impossible, but I'll say this. When you go for a big note, it's actually not about pushing air at all. It's actually less air. Now, in my youth, I would go for a big note. It might be the big, okay, let's use, doing an Elvis show, for instance, where Elvis loves these epic ballads and he goes for those ridiculously big sustained notes at the end with his orchestra behind him. It's actually not about going and then all your veins uncoiling in your neck and bleeding out of one eye and that sort of thing, doing a little poo in your underpants because you're trying to hit the note.
Seems to look like it sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And that's where theatrics come in. But, to learn to project and belt those massive notes, you actually barely use any air at all and you're very relaxed. Then you bring in the theatrics so that it looks like it's an absolutely, people are going, oh my Lord, stop, make him stop. When in fact it's just part of theatrics because people like to see you, sweating but yes, that's too much of a big answer to put in a short answer.
There's some information on the blog about Andy that you can check out, and perhaps we can link you to Naomi Ayres for somebody who's interested in vocal coach. So that might be a good way. And you can also email us on musicspace@learntoplaymusic.com. So that's a couple of ideas there.
We also have a question from Andrew. What are some exercises used to recover?
Okay, the recovery exercises, again, it's something that, you know, needs to be. I mean, I did a sort of a half-a-day course to learn how to do this correctly. So putting it into a one-paragraph answer is probably going to be a little difficult. But it's about, first of all, you've blown your voice out because you've been pushing too much air, and it's gone hoarse, it's gone, or you've lost it altogether. It's not the end of the world, and it can be saved. And by doing so, we siren. Okay, so okay, how will I explain this? We'll put our tongue on the roof of our mouth. Okay, so suddenly we can't expel air or any noise out through our mouth. It's now going to come out through our nose, and so we're going to go. That's one very, very half of the answer. But that sirening and that softening and just stop, it's the amount of air you're pushing and bellowing and screaming that's, you know, breaking all the rules. By simply sirening and trying not to push any air across your vocal folds in the middle of a song, keeping in mind you've got to do this in 30 seconds. You know, guitar, take a solo. You know.
So is that what you're doing when you keep pointing at me?
Correct. Yes. Yes. Look, again, very difficult question to answer in a paragraph, but I hope that sort of painted the picture.
We also have a question from David who asks, can you sing us some Elvis?
Sure.
What would you like to do?
Wow.
Yeah, I love that one.
Kentucky Rain. How about Kentucky Rain?
Okay.
In the
Little
Ghetto.
snippet. Oh, which one? Everyone knows In the Ghetto, don't they?
All right. Or what about Little Sister? And we did a great slow bluesy version of Little Sister once. Little sister, don't you? A little sister, don't you? Little sister, don't you kiss me once or twice? You say it's very nice to make you run. Little sister, don't you do what your big sister does? Well, I dated your big sister. I had took her to the show. I went for some candy. Along came Jim Dandy and they stuck her right out the door. Little sister, don't you? Little sister, don't you? Little sister, don't you kiss me once or twice? And she is very nice to make her run, yeah. Little sister, don't you do what your big sister does? Little sister, don't you do what your big sister does? That's perhaps, if Elvis decided to become a blues singer, it's probably, you know, I wasn't quite in Elvis mode today, but.
Worked for me.
We have one last question from Gina, who asks, how did you go from singing to doing voice work for TV, and if there are any tips for making that leap?
Okay, well, I decided as a young man that my entire life and career was going to be about making a living from my voice. And so whatever that encompassed. Now, you know, strangely, I've always had a passion for you know, good quality radio commercials and TV ads. And I remember them from a little boy. I remember campaigns from the 60s because I had an ear for it. And I thought I could do that. So for me, it was about, again, you know, yep, I'm going to be a vocalist and I'd love to be as big as Elvis or Tom Jones and tour the world, but I'm guessing that's not going to happen. So what else can I do to make a living from this? How about doing some narrations and some voiceovers? And I was very offended once. I was talking with a guy in New York and he was an actor. And he said to me, oh, I'm having a real tough time. I can't get any acting gigs, so I've been forced to go back to doing voiceovers. I wanted to cuff him around the ear. That is an absolute art. And it is a career. It's a standalone career by itself. And to be forced to go back to doing voiceovers, I just wanted to cuff him around the ear. If you want to get into that side of things, you should probably you'll often find in your own hometown somebody that conducts a 2-day or a weekend radio, you know, discover your voice type course. I would suggest you do that. Listen to what they have to say about projecting and speaking smoothly. And then put yourself a little demo together. Write some scripts. Listen to some ads that you've heard on the radio or TV. Write them out verbatim. And then put them down yourself. Get somebody to help you at your local radio station or a little studio. Put yourself a little demo together. Don't talk in a big radio voice like this. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear you. They want to hear you and your natural speaking voice. Better to be hated for who you are than loved for someone you're not. If you sell yourself as this big, bold, hi, I'm Andy Seymour sort of voice, then you get booked to do that, you've got to do that for the rest of your life. And yeah. So there is a voice required. It doesn't matter whether you've got a nasally voice or whether you've got a whatever voice. There will be a job for you with that voice. At some point, somebody will want your sound. So be yourself, get a little demo together, and start knocking on doors. And it's tough. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But you've got to be a good reader. You've got to be able to speed read. You've got to read 4 words ahead. You've got to get it to time. Forget about character voices. Forget it. Speak yourself, be yourself, put a little demo together and shop yourself to radio stations. Tried to keep that as short as I could.
That's great. Well, that about wraps it up, Andy. It's great
Wow.
to have you on.
Thank you.
As our first singer or vocalist guest.
Wow. Okay.
You are the first.
Excellent.
So there you go. Bit of fame on top of the fame you already have.
Please. Really? Tell me some more. Okay.
So thanks for watching The Music Space. Next week, my guest will be Leon Olguin. He's a keyboard player from Florida, and he's going to be telling us how he can teach us 24 chords in 30 minutes, which is pretty good. I look forward to that one, because most people only know 3 at the moment, don't they? So, but that's enough.
Or one.
Or one.
Just open tune the guitar to A and just strum on A.
Just strum it forever, that's it. And don't forget, you can continue the conversation on the blog or the email, which is musicspace@learntoplaymusic.com. And we will see you next week, same time, same place on The Music Space. Let's do some Johnny Cash.
Yeah, all right. Well, I hear the train a-coming. It's a-rolling on around the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. Yeah, but that train keeps rolling on down to Xanadu. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. So I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. Watch him die. When I hear that lonesome whistle, I hang my head and cry. Ooh. It's rolling on around the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. Yeah, yeah. When I hear that lonesome whistle, I'll hang my head and cry. Thank you, mate.